Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Angelia Sunway, and today I'm going to show you about my classroom action research proposal. And as you guys can see in the screen is the title called "The Efforts to Improve Students' Learning Participation and Learning Outcomes by Implementing Scientific Learning Model in English Class, Grade 9C at SMP Negeri 31 Banjarmasin. Okay, so we're going into the chapter 1. Okay, so for chapter 1 introduction, okay, so the first one we got a background of the study here. Okay, so in the background of the study, first of all, education. We know that education plays an important role because it can increase knowledge and it can shape character and help the progress of the nation. And also, we know that the ability to speak English or to master English is a necessity in the current era of communication and globalization as now, because English lesson at school is function as a tool for students' self-development in the field of science, skills, arts, and technology, right? So because of that, English education for students is very important and needs to be taught as well as possible by the educators. And we know that in teaching and learning activities, students' motivation is plays important role, right? Students' learning motivation can be seen from the activeness or from the student participation during the teaching and learning process and from the outcomes or the achievement of student learning after participating in the learning process. And therefore, a learning method is needed that will help teaching and learning activities so that the learning objective can be achieved as expected, right? So in this research, I'm going to use the scientific method. So in scientific method, it includes aspects like observing, asking, trying, collecting data, negotiating, reasoning, and communicating in a learning process. Okay, so as you guys can see on the slide, in this classroom action research, I want to improve the learning participation and learning outcomes of the students by using the scientific learning method for the students grade 9C at SMP Negeri 31 Banjarmasin, the school where the researcher or where I was carried out PPL2. Okay, so that is the background of the study. Next we have the statement of the problem. Okay, so the statement of the problem based on the background that I have explained before is that does the scientific learning model improve the learning participation and the learning outcomes of students in English subject grade 9C at SMP Negeri 31 Banjarmasin. Okay, so that is the statement of the problem that we have in this research. Next. Okay, so next is objective of the study. This one is very important too in my research. Okay, so the first one is improving the learning participation of students grade 9C in the learning process in English subjects at SMP Negeri 31 Banjarmasin. And the second is improving learning outcomes of students grade 9C in the learning process in English subjects at SMP Negeri 31 Banjarmasin. And the last one is implementing a scientific learning model for creating student-centered learning in the learning process. Okay, so that is the objective of the research. Next, here we have the benefits of the research, okay? So the benefit of the research for the teacher, as you guys can see, there is 4 points here. The first one is develop an effective and efficient learning model that involves students so they can play an active role in the English learning process and also help increase student learning participation in class and helps improve students' learning outcomes also helps to improve the quality of the teacher professionalism as educators. So that is for the teachers. And also, of course, we have the benefits for the students, right? So it can increase student learning motivation, which can be seen from the activeness or from the students' participation during the learning process. And then the second is improving student learning outcomes, creativity, and communicative competence in English subjects. So that is the benefits for the teachers and for the students in this research. Okay, next. All right, so here we are going to the chapter 2, literature review. So what we got in this chapter, the first one is student learning activeness or student participation, right? Okay, so as you guys can see, on this slide, according to Sujana 2010, active learning is a process of teaching and learning activities in which the subject is educated intellectually and emotionally so that students are able to participate actively in carrying out learning activities. Okay, so active students learning is a very important basic element in success in a learning process, right? So active students learning is a process of teaching and learning activities that require students to be actively involved in the learning process and make the students behavior more better, all right? So the activeness of students' learning is observed when the learning process takes place in student activities. In a learning process, the students' participation during the learning process is very important because learning does not only like transfer knowledge from the teacher to the students, but also it must be create situations that can bring students to actively learn or to actively involve to achieve changes in behavior and their skills or in their knowledge. Okay. And then now, from the explanation that I have explained to you guys, um, one of the strategies so the students become more active in the learning process is to use the right learning model, right? So here I'm going to implement it scientific learning model in my classroom later. The scientific learning model is included in the student-centered approach. So because in the learning process, the scientific learning model prioritizes students who are active in the learning process, and the teacher here just acts as a facilitator. Okay, so that is the first theory, that is students learning participation. Next, we have okay, here we have scientific learning model. Okay, so as you guys can see, that learning method or learning model is a strategy that designed by the teacher to facilitate teaching and learning activities, right? And to deliver the material to students in the classroom. So the learning method is also a tool to achieve learning objectives. If the learning objectives is want to achieve active learning, the methods or the model or the learning model is must be also must be also use enable active learning as well. So that choosing the right learning method is very important for the entire teaching and learning process in the classroom. Okay, so now as you guys can see on the slide, according to Daryanto 2014, reveals that learning with the scientific method is a learning process designed in such a way that students actively construct legal concepts or principles through the stages of observing, formulating problems, submitting or formulating hypotheses, collecting data with various techniques, analyzing data, draw conclusion, and communicate the concepts, laws, or principle found. So this learning method also emphasizes the importance of collaboration and cooperation among students in the learning process or in the discussion section. Okay, so um, the scientific approach is included in SCL or student-centered learning. So, because the scientific learning model is included in SCL, where student-centered learning is means placing students as the center of the learning activities. So there are also here some of the scientific learning methods principle as follows that you guys can see. There is 4 points here. The first one is student-centered learning, and then the second is learning forms, student self-concept. Learning encourages an increase in students' thinking skills and provide opportunities for students to practice skills in communication. Okay, so that is scientific learning model, right? Next theory we have, okay, English learning in junior high school, right? All right, so we know that language is a very important communication tool that can connect one person to another person. So someone needs language to ask questions, to express opinions, to express feelings or emotion. So language is a communication tool that humans use to communicate and interact with each other, right? So here, lately that the issue of globalization requires us to become quality resources and to be able to master an international language, namely English, of course. So English is the basic for the development of English learning in various educational institutions because English lessons in junior high school serve as a tool for student self-development in the field of science, technology, skills, and art, right? So English as means of international communication is taught in formal school and Indonesia since junior high school, although they are elementary school which also teach English as a local content subject, right? Um, as you guys can see here, according to Buchart, 1998, claims that language has transactional and interactional functions. Language is not only used as a communication tool, but also to connect and build relationship with other people. Without language, a person cannot communicate effectively or express ideas or feelings, either orally or in writing, right? Okay, so in this classroom action research, I want to increase the learning participation and learning outcomes or learning achievement of the students in English, of course, at the junior high school level. Okay, and therefore, appropriate learning methods to support the achievement of learning objectives are very important. So that's why I'm using the scientific learning model as the model for my classroom action research proposal. Okay, next we have, all right, so here we have learning outcomes. All right, as you guys can see here, according to Hamalik 2006, provides an illustration that learning outcomes are obtained and measured through the progress students get after studying seriously. And the success of students in participating in the learning process at a certain level of education can be seen from the learning outcomes themselves. Okay. Okay, so learning outcomes are related to students' ability to understand learning material. So learning outcomes appear as changes in student behavior that can be observed and that can be measured in the form of change in knowledge, attitudes, and skills. So this change can be interpreted as an improvement or as an development that is better than before. For example, the students from not knowing to knowing or being impolite to being polite and so on, right? So based on the explanation that I have explained, it can be concluded that learning outcomes are embodiment of learning behavior that are usually seen in changes, habits, skills, attitudes, and abilities, right? And the success of students in participating in the learning process at a certain level of education can be seen from the learning outcomes themselves. And learning outcomes can be improved through conscious effort that is carried out systematically, leading to positive changes, which are then called the learning process. Okay, so that is learning outcomes. Okay, next, what will we have? All right, so here we are going into the chapter 3 for research method. Okay, so chapter 3 for research method, the first one is research designed. Okay, so um, according to Sujono Anas, 2009, descriptive comparative research is essentially research that seeks to find similarities and differences about objects, about people, about work procedures, ideas, criticism of people or groups of an idea or work procedure. Comparative descriptive analysis can also be used to compare the similarity of views in changes in views of people, groups, or countries on cases, events, or ideas. Okay, so in this classroom action research, I'm going to use descriptive comparative analysis techniques. Okay, so comparative descriptive analysis technique can also be used to compare the similarity. Okay, so I will going to compare the pre-cycle or before I'm going to implement the scientific learning model, and I'm going to compare it with the cycle 1 and cycle 2, which I will implement the scientific learning model. So I will compare these two. All right, so next we have research subject. Okay, for this classroom action research, the research subjects are the students of SMP Negeri 31 Banjarmasin, grade 9C, and they are totaling 34 students in the class. Okay, so that is the research subject and also the place of the research. Next is the data collection or the research instrument. Okay, so for the data collection or the research instrument, um, as you guys can see, research instruments are tools used in research to collect data with certain methods. So in this study, I'm going to use observation sheet and task as the data collection instrument, okay? So the first research instrument here is observation. So observation is used to know empirically the observed data. Okay, so this method is defined as a data collection method that is carried out by observing something or observing accompanied by regular recording of the object being studied or of the object being observed, like that. So as a scientific method, observation can also be interpreted as systematic observation and recording of the phenomena studied. Okay, so in this study, observation will be made directly by the researcher on the students of SMP Negeri 31 Banjarmasin, grade 9C in learning activities to observe the students' participation or to observe the activeness. So that is the benefits of observation here. Okay, so that is the first instrument, and then the second instrument is task, right? So in this research, after students carry out the learning process, student will be presented with tasks related to the material that they have learned before with the teachers to find out whether the planned learning objectives have been achieved or not. So that is the second instrument. Okay, that is data collection and research instrument. Next, we have, okay, so here I have the data analysis, okay? So data analysis is a method used to analyze data obtained from research, and researcher must ensure which analysis patterns will be used, whether statistical analysis or non-statistical analysis. So this type of data analysis is depending on the type of the data that will be collected. So because here I have two kind of data, that is the learning outcomes of the students and also the students' participation or the students' activeness in the learning process. So I have two kind of data analysis. That is, the first one is non-statistical and the second one is statistical analysis. So in non-statistical, it will be taken from the data collected through observation sheet about the students' participation who will be observed by the researcher in the learning process. That is for the non-statistical. And for the next one, it will be taken from the data collected through tests on the learning outcomes or the learning achievement of the students who have participated in the process of learning English using scientific learning method or learning model. So that is the kind of data analysis that I will use. And next we have, okay, so this is also the data analysis. So this classroom action research consists of three active activity cycles, namely pre-cycle, cycle 1, and cycle 2. So in pre-cycle, I will not use or I will not implement the scientific learning model. And then in cycle 1 and cycle 2, I will implement the scientific learning model to compare, okay, because my research proposal is about descriptive comparative descriptive analysis. So I will compare um, the learning participation and the learning outcomes of the students between the non-implemented of scientific learning model and the implemented of the scientific learning model. Okay, so the first one is the pre-cycle. Actually, there in pre-cycle and cycle 1 and cycle 2, actually they have the same activity. They have four activity. There is planning, action, observation, and reflection. Okay, so in pre-cycle, for the planning section, I will develop a lesson plan, of course, and I will prepare observation instruments, that is observation sheet, before using scientific learning method, before I implement it. Because in pre-cycle, that, like I said before, I will not implement the scientific learning model first. And then I will prepare students' worksheets and evaluations as a task. And for the action, carry out the learning activities step by step according to the lesson plan, provide students worksheet and evaluations, and draw a conclusion when it comes to the end of the learning progress process. And then for observation, identify and formulate problems that occur during the learning process, observing student participation and performance. And for the reflection, record the result of observation, analyze evaluate the results of observation, and preparing learning methods for cycle 1. Next is cycle 1. Okay, in cycle 1, the first one is planning. I will develop a lesson plan, develop a research instrument in the form of observation, and prepare students' worksheet and evaluation as a task at the end. And then for action, carry out the learning activities step by step according to the lesson plan, implementing scientific learning model, and provide students worksheets and evaluation as a test, and also draw a conclusion. All right, and then for the observation, I will observing the students' activeness or the students' participation in the learning activities by using observation sheet, and I will record every activity and changes on the students that occur when the implementation of the scientific approach learning model occur. And for the reflection, I will analyze the findings when making observation. I will analyze the weaknesses and successes of students when applying the scientific learning model, and I will reflect on the student activity during the learning process using a scientific learning model, and I will reflecting on the outcomes or the students' achievement on the using scientific learning model. Okay, that is the cycle one. And the last one is cycle two. Okay, so in planning, the reflection results are evaluated, discussed, and seek improvement. Efforts to apply to the cycle two, design improvement based on the result of cycle one, develop a lesson plan, develop research instruments in the form of observation, prepare students' worksheets and evaluation for tests. And for action, carry out the learning activities step by step according to the lesson plan, implementing the scientific learning model, provide students worksheets and evaluation as a task, and also draw a conclusion. And for observation, I will be observing the students' activeness or the students' participation in learning activities by using observation sheet and record every activity and changes on the students that occur when the implementation of the scientific approach learning model occur. And the last one is reflection. I will analyze the findings when making observations, reflecting on students' learning outcomes by applying model scientific approach learning, and analyze the findings and final results of the study. So that is the cycle two. All right. Okay, so I think that's all for my classroom action research proposal. I hope you enjoy and thank you so much for your attention. And good afternoon, guys. Thank you so much.